What's up, y'all? The weather's starting to warm up. It's time to get the boat ready for summer. Oh my gosh. Look at this mess. Well, the number one step is cover your boat to begin with, but you know how it goes. You get busy, and if you live near a bunch of trees like me, sometimes you forget. So I'm gonna get this whole thing pressure washed, and I'm gonna run through step by step everything you need to know to get your boat ready for summer. From tires, trailer lights, safety chains, all the way to the outboard. Thanks to the power of the internet, you don't have to sit here and watch me pressure wash this whole thing. So at the snap of my fingers, this thing's gonna be clean. All right, y'all, let's get started. So first, you can see how clean I got this thing. Much better than it was. Much, much better. So the first thing we're gonna start with is the tires. You wanna make sure you check your tires and make sure they're not dry rotted at all, because these things sit for so long, they tend to dry rot. And you can see these aren't dry rotted at all, but you especially wanna make sure they're not, because if they are, they'll blow up on you. I've had it happen to me before. A good tip for you if you live somewhere where there's a bunch of sun on your trailer is to get tire covers. That way you can drape them over here and the sun won't destroy the tires, because having the sun beat down on these tires, it destroys them over time, and they sit too. The next thing we're going to check is the tire pressure. You want to make sure that the tire pressure is set within the range on the tire. Now we're going to check, you're going to want to check your bearing grease. And this is probably one of the most important steps on your trailer. You want to make sure that this thing is fully seated. Tap it with a block of wood if you have to, so that it's fully seated up here so it doesn't fall off when you're driving the trailer. And you can see that this is pink and it's got a bunch of water in here, and that's not good. You probably want to tap it off. You hit it down from the top or the sides, and you pound it off and clean it out, and then you can re-grease it. Now, if you've never checked the condition of the bearings on your trailer, it's a good idea to take the whole assembly apart, jack it up, put it on jack stands, and take all these lugs off and take the whole thing apart and clean all the old grease out of there and put some fresh grease in there and replace the bearings. Because if you let it sit for a long period of time and you never put new grease in it or use it or run it dry with no grease in it, it'll destroy the bearings. There's a shaft that goes down the center, and if that thing gets destroyed, then you're gonna have to go to a shop and get them to cut it off if you don't have the tools to do it, and weld a new shaft on there. So you really wanna make sure that this thing's in good condition to begin with. And you pump it up with grease until the grease starts to ooze out. Use a marine bearing grease. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. You're gonna wanna pump it up until it starts oozing out, and you'll see this thing, it'll move out a little bit. This is a bearing buddy. Most boat trailers have them. Alright, next you're going to want to check the trailer lights. You're going to want to make sure all these trailer lights work, because these things burn out all the time. They get shorts, the wiring gets water in it, it gets corrosion, and they never work. So you want to check them every single year. Now, the best thing to do is get LED lights. That way you can hopefully avoid some of the problems that these traditional light bulb ones have, but you still want to make sure and check them. So to check the wiring, see there's another light right there. Now on the wiring, you want to make sure that there's no dirt and corrosion down in there. You can see this one's pretty nasty, but you want to make sure that these connectors are nice and clean, because when you hook it up to the truck, if it doesn't get electricity through to it, it doesn't do you any good. So you can see this one's damaged, but I mean, it still works fine. And a tip for these trailer harnesses is you can get this split loom down at the auto parts store. It's like 3/8 inch tube, and you just run the wires in it, and you can tape it every so often. That way it'll prevent it from getting damaged if it rubs on the ground while you're towing it, or getting snagged or broken or anything. Now most trailers, they get the ground through the body of the trailer, and it's the absolute worst way to get a ground for electrical wiring on a boat trailer because there's so much corrosion. So a tip you can do is find the pinout and get the ground wire, and you can run a ground wire to every single light. That way you avoid problems, because if it just gets the ground through the tongue, or you know, if it has a screw and drilled and tapped and the wire comes off of here and goes to that, you can have intermittent light problems. So the best way to do it is run your grounds all the way back to every single light. And I know it's a pain in the butt, but it's well worth it. If you run a ground to every single light, then you hopefully will avoid any problems. Now the next thing you're going to want to check is your safety chains. These things are pretty rusted, but you can see they probably need to be replaced, but they're still in pretty good condition, I mean, for a boat trailer. And you want to check the bolts, you know, common sense stuff. Check all the bolts. Make sure that nothing is broken, everything works right. If you have trailer brakes, you're going to want to check the brake fluid in the reservoir. You know, make sure your tongue jack works right. Maybe grease it a little bit so that it works right so you don't have any problems. Check your boat winch and make sure that this thing's greased up. You can see this thing needs some paint on it, but the wire's not frayed at all. You want to make sure that that wire's in good condition, because that's what's holding your boat on the trailer. And you can see this safety chain right here is pretty rusted, so it's probably a good idea to replace this, because after all, it is a safety chain. It holds your boat on here in case the winch fails. So the next thing you want to do is make sure, you know, you check every single bolt and stuff. Make sure there's no loose or broken bolts that hold the trailer together. This trailer's all bolted together, which I'm not too big a fan of, but it's got these U-bolts that hold it all together. So you want to check all that. And this is a roller trailer. It doesn't have bunks like bass boats or smaller boats. So, you know, you want to check all the rollers and stuff and make sure everything's working right before you go and start towing the boat for the season. Your tie-down straps, you want to make sure that you have good straps and make sure they're, you know, gonna hold your boat on here. That's really important, because they're a safety item. You know, you want to make sure the bolts are tight and everything's good in case your boat does come loose from the front. It'll still hold it on here. Alright, so that's about it for the trailer. Let's move on to the boat itself now. Alright, now for the boat itself, you're going to want to make sure you check all your controls and make sure these cables are working properly. You know, go back and forth. Make sure that everything's nice and smooth. And it feels like it is. You're going to want to check all your wiring harnesses and everything up under there, you know, fuse boxes and stuff, and make sure that there's no corrosion or any of that stuff in there, because there always is, unless you have some high dollar fuse boxes. You're going to want to make sure and check the light right here. You're going to want to make sure to check the light in the front of the boat. The bow light right here, make sure that thing's working right. You know, check all your cleats, make sure everything's nice and tight. Your fuel tank, if you don't have a below deck fuel tank, you can see that this one's cracking, and I've already taken it apart, and it's not leaching any of that black stuff in the tank, but it does need to be replaced. You want to check every single fuel line, especially fuel lines. This is probably one of the most important things to check on the boat because guys let them sit. You know, people talk about ethanol eating fuel lines. Gas sits in the lines. It eats them up. They're out in the sun. They bake with gas in them all day long. You know, it wreaks havoc on them. So you really want to make sure to check them all. So, you know, make sure there's no leaks. Make sure these things are nice and tight. Check the vent lines in the back. Check all the vents. Check the pickup for the outboard if you have an outboard. You're going to want to check your primer bulb and make sure that it works properly. Make sure all your hose clamps are tight and there's no cracking on these fuel lines. There's no cracking. Well, you can see it split right there. Look at that. This is why it's so important to check everything. I replaced this last year and look at it, it's already cracked. These things do not last, do they? So, it's probably a good idea to replace this because you don't want this thing sucking air. That would not be good. But, check that. Make sure you check all the cables. You especially want to make sure all your cables are in a good working order and, you know, not pinched up and binding up and stuff. Your bilge pump, you want to make sure that the bilge pump is working properly, so hook your battery up and test your bilge pump. And if you have a float switch for the bilge pump, you want to make sure that that's working properly too. That's another really important thing to check because, you know, you start taking on water, it's a good idea to have a good working bilge pump to get that water out of there. This is just a small one on this boat, but if you have a really big boat, you especially want to make sure it's working right. You know, just check all the wiring. Basically, just check over everything. And if it looks like it's broken, you know, fix it before you get out on the water or before the summer starts, because there's nothing worse than working on a boat, you know, when everyone else is out having fun. So, all right, y'all. That's the end of part 1 of the video. Make sure y'all check out the description for part 2 of the video where I show you how to check out your outboard/IO boat motor and get it ready for summer. Alright y'all, thanks for watching. Don't forget to check the description for other videos about outboards, boat parts. I'll put links to some of these boat parts that commonly go bad. That way you don't have to search all over the place for them. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out. Later.